Namaskar, a warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Manoj Singh Rana, and with me is Abhineet Shukla, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls for urgent and unhindered humanitarian assistance and an inclusive administration at the G20 Extraordinary Summit on Afghanistan. External Affairs Minister of India Dr. S. Jaishankar stresses upon the need to ensure that Afghanistan is not used to foment terrorism at the CICA Foreign Ministers meet. Muqtada al-Sadr's party emerges as the biggest winner in the Iraqi general elections. Thailand announces plans to end quarantine requirements for fully vaccinated travellers from low-risk nations. COP26 President Alok Sharma calls upon world leaders to deliver at the upcoming Glasgow summit to limit global warming. And IMF projects India to be the fastest growing economy in the world in 2022. As the nation is on the verge of vaccinating 100 crore people against COVID-19, All India Radio salutes the doctors, nurses and others who made this possible. At the same time, we caution our listeners that the battle against COVID is not yet over. We appeal to our listeners to get fully vaccinated at the earliest and also help others get vaccinated. During the festival season, please follow these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask. Maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing and focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact the national helpline numbers 011-2397-8046 and 1075. And now the news in detail. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday virtually participated in the G20 Extraordinary Summit on Afghanistan. In his remarks, Mr. Modi welcomed the initiative of the Italian G20 presidency in convening the meeting to take stock of the current situation in Afghanistan. He emphasized the centuries-old people-to-people ties between India and Afghanistan. Mr. Modi mentioned that over the last 2 decades, India has contributed to promoting socio-economic development and capacity building of youth and women in Afghanistan. He recalled that over 500 development projects have been implemented by India in Afghanistan. The Prime Minister noticed that the Afghan people have a great feeling of friendship for India. He conveyed that every Indian feels the pain of the Afghan people facing hunger and malnutrition. Mr. Modi emphasized the need for the international community to ensure that Afghanistan has immediate and unhindered access to humanitarian assistance. The Prime Minister also underlined the need to ensure that the Afghan territory does not become a source of radicalization and terrorism, regionally or globally. He emphasized on the need to enhance our joint fight against the nexus of radicalization, terrorism and the smuggling of drugs and arms in the region. In order to preserve the socio-economic gains of the last 20 years and to restrict the spread of radical ideology, the Prime Minister called for an inclusive administration in Afghanistan, which includes women and minorities. Mr. Modi conveyed support for the important role of the United Nations in Afghanistan and called for a renewed support of the G20 for the message contained in the UN Security Council Resolution 2593 on Afghanistan. The Prime Minister called on the international community to forge a unified international response, without which it would be difficult to bring about the desired change in Afghanistan's situation. Ahead of the G20 Extraordinary Leaders Summit on Afghanistan, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres underlined the precarious economic and security situation in Afghanistan. Mr. Guterres appealed to the international community to take action to avoid an economic collapse of the country.
Already before the Taliban takeover in August, Afghanistan's fragile economy, which has been kept afloat by foreign aid over the past 20 years, suffered from the impact of drought and COVID. Right now, with assets frozen and development aid paused, the economy is breaking down. Banks are closing and essential services such as healthcare have been suspended in many places. We need to find ways to make the economy breathe again. And this can be done without violating international laws or compromising principles. We must seek ways to create the conditions that would allow Afghan professionals and civil servants to continue working to serve the Afghan population. I urge the world to take action and inject liquidity into the Afghan economy to avoid collapse.
Mr. Guterres warned that the worsening situation in Afghanistan will have ripple effects in the rest of the world.
This is a make or break moment. If we do not act and help Afghans weather this storm and do it soon, not only they but all the world will pay a heavy price. Without food, without jobs, without their rights protected, we will see more and more Afghans fleeing their homes in search of a better life. The flow of illicit drugs, criminal and terrorist networks will also likely increase. This will not only badly affect Afghanistan itself, but also the region and the rest of the world. We all must do our part.
Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden also participated in the virtual G20 leaders meet to discuss Afghanistan. A statement from the White House said that the United States remains committed to working closely with the international community and using diplomatic, humanitarian and economic means to address the situation in Afghanistan and support the Afghan people. In Iraq, the preliminary results of the parliamentary elections have been announced by Independent High Electoral Commission (IHEC). Chairman of the Board of Commissioners at IHEC Judge Jalil Adnan Khalaf announced the results without giving details on their political entities or the number of seats won by major competing political blocs. Shiite Muslim cleric Muqtada al-Sadr's party was the biggest winner in the Iraqi election. According to initial results and other reports, the party increased the number of seats it holds in parliament. According to local media accounts, the State of Law Coalition, headed by former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, secured about 35 seats in Baghdad and other central and southern provinces.
External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, stressed upon the need to ensure that Afghanistan is not used to foment terrorism. Making the remarks at the joint meeting of CICA Foreign Ministers meet with the President of Kazakhstan, Dr. Jaishankar said that the developments in Asia are closely connected with those of the world.
The situation in Afghanistan is therefore of grave concern. Promotion of economic and social activity is intrinsic to progress and prosperity. Asia, in particular, suffers from a deficit of connectivity, which is so essential to that purpose. As we build these modern arteries of commerce, it is absolutely essential that the most basic principles of international relations are observed. Respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of nations rank foremost among them.
The minister also drew the attention of the meeting to the cause of reformed multilateralism.
Even as the world seeks to overcome the pandemic, there are equally pressing challenges it must address. Climate action ranks high among them. In many ways, the mindset required is similar if we are to decisively forge ahead. Both pandemic and climate change require genuine and sincere international collaboration. They must ensure accessibility and affordability, especially to the most vulnerable. And they are a call for us all to adopt a more sustainable lifestyle.
Meanwhile, President of the upcoming Conference of Parties, COP26, Mr. Alok Sharma, emphasized that world leaders must deliver at the COP26 Climate Change Summit in Glasgow. In his speech at the UNESCO, Mr. Sharma said that the whole world will converge on Glasgow for the COP26. Referring to the 6th assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, he said that it was a code red for the climate, and unless acted upon immediately, the 1.5 degree limit will slip out of reach. Terming the 1.1 degree warming effects as alarming, he said every fraction of a degree makes a difference. Referring to Turkey and the UAE recently declaring net zero targets, Mr. Sharma said that 75% of the global economy is now covered by a net zero target and the figure is climbing. He appealed to the G20 leaders that they must step up ahead of COP26 and that net zero commitments are critical to limit global temperature rise below the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold.
India's Chief of Army Staff, COAS, General Naravani, has proceeded on a 5-day visit to Sri Lanka from Tuesday. This is his first visit to Sri Lanka as COAS. In a statement, the Defence Ministry said that the General will be meeting Sri Lanka's senior military and civilian leadership and discuss avenues for enhancing India-Sri Lanka defence relations. General Naravani will witness the culmination phase of the joint exercise between India and Sri Lanka, Exercise Mitra Shakti, and later address the students and faculty at the Defence Services Command and Staff College at Batlanda. The Army Chief is also scheduled to call on the Honourable President and Honourable Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. Chief of Naval Operations of the US Navy, Admiral Gilday, is on a 5-day official visit to India from the 11th of October. As part of his visit, Admiral Gilday is also scheduled to embark the USN Career Strike Group of the East Coast of India along with an Indian delegation. The Defence Ministry in a statement said that the Indian Navy closely cooperates with the US Navy on numerous issues, which include operational interactions such as the Malabar and Rimpak series of exercises. In addition, warships from both navies regularly make port calls at each other's ports. It added that both navies have also been cooperating towards exploring new avenues for collaboration with a shared aim of a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific.
Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund (IMF) has projected that India's economy is expected to grow by 9.5% in 2021. As per latest projections by the IMF released on Tuesday, global recovery continues, but the momentum has weakened and uncertainty has increased. The IMF in its latest report also estimated that India will be the fastest growing economy in 2022 with a GDP growth rate of 8.5%. The IMF in a statement said that the fault lines opened by COVID-19 are looking more persistent. The global economy is projected to grow at 5.9% in 2021 and 4.9% in 2022, 0.1 percentage point lower for 2021 than in the July forecast. The downward revision for 2021 reflects a downgrade for advanced economies.
Now the coronavirus updates from around the world. Thailand's Prime Minister Mr. Prayut Chan-o-cha announced plans to end quarantine requirements for fully vaccinated travellers from at least 10 low-risk nations as of November 1st. In a televised speech, the Prime Minister said that the first group would include those coming from the United Kingdom, Singapore, Germany, China and the United States. The United Nations chief has said that more than 100 million people across the world have been forced into poverty because of the pandemic. Secretary General Antonio Guterres told an International Monetary Fund panel that global solidarity was missing as those living in conflict-affected and poor countries suffered the most. India handed over one more life support ambulance equipped with modern life-saving equipment to Bangladesh on Tuesday. The ambulance was handed over in a ceremony held at Singra Upazila Health Complex in Nathor. The brand new ambulance is fitted with modern life-saving equipment. It can be used by the paramedics and first responders to provide critical life support in case of emergency and trauma en route to hospital for treatment. The ambulance is part of the overall program of supply of 109 life support ambulances announced by Prime Minister Narendra Modi during his visit to Bangladesh in March this year. This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter @AIR News Alerts.
Welcome back to the World News. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you the remarks by Minister of State for External Affairs, Mr. V. Muralidharan, at the UN Security Council during the open debate on peace building and sustaining peace.
In a globalized, liberalized and interlinked world, post-conflict state building has faced increasing societal expectations in terms of political space and socio-economic development, gender equality and human rights. As a result, state building has become more complicated. Building peace and sustaining the same, therefore, is proving more complex than ending the conflict. This is evident more so in the context of the developing world. At the same time, we have several successful examples where countries have managed to overcome post-conflict challenges. These include South Africa, the transition from apartheid to free and open society, Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Rwanda and Burundi, each of which have been examples of successful transition of post-conflict state building, and South Sudan, where we are witnessing the transition. These societies are diverse and have managed to sustain peace through inclusive approach by setting examples for similar states to emulate. We also have several other examples including in South Asia, where diversity has always been the hallmark of these societies. The political leadership of respective countries respecting universal values of peace, truth and compassion have contributed immensely to state building. Mr. President, when we deal with countries coming out of conflict and going into peace building, putting in place strong legal framework as well as building credible institutions based on solid principles is critical. This will also ensure that diversity is protected and inclusivity is fostered. We need to encourage donor countries which are contributing generously to peace building in Africa and other regions to ensure that those countries coming out of conflict are able to put in place an enduring framework that withstands the test of time. The challenge will always be to make trade-off between the immediate and long term. We believe the UN system as a whole should work closely with member states and regional organizations in line with their national requirement and needs and not advocate imposition of ideas or solutions from outside. Terrorism is a clear manifestation of how forces inimical to unity and diversity can seek to destroy the social cohesion and democratic fabric of countries by inter alia fomenting disaffection, hatred and violence. The increasing spread of terrorism in Africa is a matter of serious concern. What is even more unfortunate is that these terrorist forces and groups are receiving encouragement from member states which seek to divide communities by legitimizing terrorist activities. The UN Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy has clearly reinforced yet again that terrorism cannot be justified under any ground and that no country should provide an excuse for such activities. It is equally important that UN organizations take GCTS as a template and not give any encouragement or excuse, even indirectly, to efforts of member states to justify terrorism in any way. As regards religious identities, we are witnessing how member states are facing newer form of religious phobias. While we have condemned anti-Semitism, Islamophobia and Christianophobia, we fail to recognize that there are more virulent forms of religious phobias emerging and taking roots, including anti-Hindu, anti-Buddhist and anti-Sikh phobias. We have seen in our own neighborhood and elsewhere the destruction of temples, glorification of breaking of idols in temples, violation of Gurudwara premises, massacre of Sikh pilgrims in Gurudwaras, destruction of Bamiyan Buddhas and other religious iconic sites. Our inability to even acknowledge these atrocities and phobias only gives those forces encouragement that phobias against some religions are more acceptable than those against others. If we choose to be selective about criticizing such phobias or ignoring them, we do so at our own peril. It's now the time to look at peace building in the broader context and in a more focused manner, especially in the context of COVID pandemic, which is threatening to erode the gains we have made over the years. The 2020 review of the UN peacebuilding architecture that concluded last year gave us a new set of twin resolutions on peacebuilding and sustaining peace. We appreciate that as part of its 2020-24 strategy, the Peacebuilding Fund has put forth a comprehensive scenario covering a horizon of 5 years. Mr. President, we have just heard the remarks from Ms. Fauzia Koofi. The change in authority in Kabul was neither through negotiations nor inclusive. We have consistently called for a broad-based, inclusive process that involves the representation of all sections of Afghans. The expectations of the international community on Afghanistan, including on combating terrorism, are set out clearly in UN Security Council Resolution 2593. It's important that commitments made in this regard are respected and adhered to. India has always played a constructive and significant role in the context of peace building through its extensive development partnership with developing countries, particularly in Africa and Asia, and with LDCs, LLDCs and SIDs. India has and continues to assist countries bilaterally in post-conflict situations by providing substantial grants and soft loans. Apart from focusing on infrastructure, especially housing, education and health, on connectivity, on providing livelihood to those impacted by conflict, especially in agriculture, and on projects at the grassroots level, which directly impact the lives of people, India also provides extensive education training and capacity building, including vocational training and in IT focusing particularly on the youth. We will continue to be a pillar of strength for all developing countries in their transition to development, progress and prosperity. Thank you, Mr. President.
Coal prices in China surged to a record as key mining regions in northern China suffered flooding, resulting in difficulties to boost supply amid an escalating energy crisis. According to media reports, floods closed 60 of the 682 coal mines in northern Shanxi province, country's biggest coal-producing region in recent days. Some sites are now slowly resuming operations. 2 mines in Shanxi province have been impacted by heavy rainfall. Ensuring coal supplies become a top priority in Beijing, even as the country plans for a carbon-neutral future. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang stressed the importance of energy security to China's continued development in a speech released on Monday, in which he reiterated the country's plans to keep investing in coal, at least in the near term. Coal accounts for nearly 70% of China's power generation. Our Beijing correspondent reports that prices have soared this year as mine output failed to keep up with surging post-pandemic demand, depleting inventories. Shortages and high prices have led to power cuts to factories in most of the country as the government prioritizes supplies for home heating in the winter.
India's Minister for Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Bhupendra Yadav, asserted that nature, climate and One Health approach integrating animal, environment and human health form the core of India's post-COVID-19 recovery and Atmanirbhar Bharat strategy. Addressing the UN Biodiversity Conference, the minister reiterated India's commitments towards mainstreaming biodiversity across all sectors.
Land restoration is the best solution for biodiversity loss, and therefore there is an urgent need to restore the degraded lands. I am very pleased to say that India has already set aside over 17.41% of its geographical area for meeting the conservation objective, and more areas are being identified to enhance this coverage. I understand that the recent digital reporting by India has significantly contributed to achieving the global conservation target under HE Biodiversity Target 11 and Sustainable Development Goal 15.
Dussehra, the festival celebrating the victory of good over evil, was celebrated at the Indian Embassy in Beijing with great enthusiasm. Our Beijing correspondent reports that around 2,000 people, including a large number of Beijing-based diplomats, Chinese nationals and members of the Indian diaspora, took part in the Dussehra Mela organized at India House on Sunday. The highlight of the cultural program was a stage performance of Ram Leela by the Indian community members, fireworks display, and burning the effigy of Ravan, which received a thunderous applause from Beijing-based diplomatic corps, officials of Chinese think tanks, and members of the Indian diaspora who immersed themselves in Indian culture. An art exhibition based on Ramayana was also organized by the embassy with the support from Lalit Kala Academy. Ambassador Vikram Mistry hailed the Indian community for conceptualizing and staging the Ram Leela in a first of its kind in Beijing, a befitting display of Indian cultural ethos as India celebrates Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav across the globe. More from our Beijing correspondent.
Navaratri festivities came alive at sprawling lawns of India House in Beijing as a spellbinding show of Ram Leela was staged on a glitzy evening. During the day, the ambience was of a lively market with fun and frolic galore as families of Indian embassy officials and Indian diaspora put up 28 makeshift stalls to sell a wide variety of Indian artifacts, carpets, ethnic jewelry and clothing, and Indian food, which attracted huge crowds. Proceeds of the homemade candles stall put up by the embassy's Spouses Club, which was hugely popular, would go to charities. Stalls for learning Indian sari draping and wearing colorful Punjabi turbans remain greatly popular. The cultural performance included Indian classical dances performed by ICCR scholars and noted Chinese exponents and Bollywood dances by Chinese people. Indian community members also presented Tamil folk songs, Kuchipudi dance, Rajasthani folk dance, Garba, Dandiya and Bollywood dance. Students from Beijing-based Indian yoga schools demonstrated yoga postures. A quiz on Indian cultural heritage and festivals evoked great participation by the crowds. Anshuman Mishra for World News, All India Radio, Beijing.
And now a report from the business world.
At the stock markets, rising for the fourth straight day, Sensex at the BSE gained 149 points, or 0.3% to end at a fresh record high of 60,284. Nifty at the NSE rose 46 points to a new all-time high of 17,992. At the foreign exchange market, the rupee shed 13 paise to 75 rupees and 49 paise against the US dollar. Amongst global markets, Asian markets ended lower. So Japan's Nikkei 225 index fell 0.9%. China Shanghai Composite Index lost 1.3%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index slipped 1.5%. South Korea's Kospi Index dropped 1.4% at the close, and Singapore's Straits Times Index has shed 0.1%. In Europe, London's FTSE 100 has shed 0.5%. Germany's DAX had lost 0.4%, while France's CAC 40 had fallen 0.3% in intraday trade. Brent crude oil rose towards $84 a barrel today, supported by a rebound in global demand that is contributing to energy shortages in big economies such as China. With demand growing as economies recover from pandemic lows, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries OPEC and allied producers are sticking to plans to restore output gradually rather than boost supply quickly. So Brent crude gained 17 cents to trade at $83.82 per barrel. US crude futures moved up 8 cents to $80.60 per barrel. Back home, gold rose 129 rupees to 46,286 rupees per 10 grams at Delhi's bullion market. Arjun Chowdhury for World News, All India Radio.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Globe and Mail says climate activists call for investigation into Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro over administration's Amazon policies. The Guardian reports far-right COVID conspiracy theories fueling anti-Semitism, warn UK experts. Financial Times writes IMF board backs Georgieva to continue as managing director. The Sydney Morning Herald says Prince Charles urges Scott Morrison to attend climate summit to help avoid global catastrophe. Sputnik News reports City of London sees record £20 billion of investment in tech startups as UK takes on US and China. Wall Street Journal writes Tesla awaits green light for production in Germany.
And a quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls for urgent and unhindered humanitarian assistance and an inclusive administration at the G20 Extraordinary Summit on Afghanistan. External Affairs Minister of India Dr. S. Jaishankar stresses upon the need to ensure that Afghanistan is not used to foment terrorism at the CICA Foreign Ministers meet. Muqtada al-Sadr's party emerges as the biggest winner in the Iraqi general elections. Thailand announces plans to end quarantine requirements for fully vaccinated travellers from low-risk nations. COP26 President Alok Sharma calls upon world leaders to deliver at the upcoming Glasgow summit to limit global warming. And IMF projects India to be the fastest growing economy in the world in 2022. India is celebrating the 152nd birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Spain on their national day. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.